What is up? Welcome to this week's episode of the Vanflip podcast. I'm sitting here with Brian from the Long Island, New York hardcore-based band Incendiary. Welcome to the show, Brian. How you doing today, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
First time, long time.
First time, long time. First podcast you've ever done, or
Not first
Okay.
podcast I've ever done. First official, I think, interaction with Lambgoat I've ever had. So
that's
it's,
fine.
it's
That's
an honor.
fine. You guys have been on the website for a long time, off and on throughout the career of the band. I think
Yep.
we reviewed going through the what do you call it? The back history or the archives. There you go. That was what I was searching for. Going through the archives, I saw that we did review your 2017 album "Thousand Mile Stare," and it got a 9. So
Wow.
I don't know
Holy
how you
shit.
guys finagled that, but
Yeah.
apparently a 9 is technically a 10 in the Lambgoat world because of
You graded on a curve.
yeah, it's a
for
little curve.
snarkiness.
Yeah. Like 10s are classic, albums that whatever gold sort of, I don't know what they would call it, but yeah. So, but kudos to you guys on that. But you guys after, I guess around COVID, you guys kind of like took more of a break than you probably wanted to. You had some tours lined up when COVID happened, and we don't have to get into the COVID stuff. We've talked about it endlessly on the podcast, but you did have some things lined up that were taken from you guys, but you also did like a couple things after that too, some shows, some
Yep.
appearances and whatnot. But the big news is obviously you guys are back, kind of in full force with your the new album coming out, Change the Way You Think About Pain. And
That's right.
I honestly have to admit, I've been listening to it almost endlessly since we've gotten the release of the digital
Wow,
advance.
awesome, man.
So
Love to hear that.
yeah,
Great.
it's you hooked me on the first single, and when I got the advance, it's just kind of been in constant rotation. So
Great. Yeah, it's more where that came from.
yeah, good. Oh no, I know that. Yeah, the fan base
Yeah.
will definitely know that
No, that's-
as soon.
That's great. That's great to hear. I mean, we always kind of did do things in a bubble, and we recorded the record about this time last year. So it's been done for like 10 months or so, and we kept it really close to the chest because we didn't want people that we know, even in our circle, kind of being over it by the time it actually comes out and getting burned out on it. So we haven't really gotten much feedback on the record at all yet. I mean, we're all super proud of it, but it's nice to hear that somebody that's actually heard the thing by now, it's landing with them.
Yeah, and I mean, I do spend a lot of time with music too, so it's one of the ones that I tend to go back to listening to throughout the week or whatnot. So yeah, I definitely am looking forward to you guys hitting the road too, and hopefully we can catch you at some point. I don't know if you guys have anything announced as of yet, but this
Few
will come.
shows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, you have a couple one-off shows and some appearances, but I don't necessarily know if you have like a full support tour announced for that or anything.
Nah, nothing like that. I mean, that's never really been part of the Incendiary plan. It torn that extensively. We do, we kind of do as much as we can around some of our commitments in our personal lives, which that usually translates to us doing a few flyouts, one-offs when festival opportunities come up. We're able to make them happen. But yeah, I mean, we just announced most of our dates for 2023 following the record release, and we're covering a good amount of ground. I'm pretty happy with it. We're hitting we're going back to LA finally, which we haven't been to since before the pandemic, which is like our last show in LA was one of our best Incendiary shows literally ever in the history of the band. So we're super excited to get back there finally. We're getting to Detroit and Chicago, which both kind of overdue to come back and play. Detroit, we just haven't been able to get there for a while, and finally got a good opportunity with Tied Down Fest. And then Chicago, we owed Chicago one. We had to unfortunately cancel our last scheduled Chicago show. We got invited by Knock Loose to play their kind of like shows are back again show in Chicago at the Metro, which is huge sick venue. And then there was some fucking crazy torrential hurricane type weather in New York when we were trying to fly out, and it fucked the whole thing up. So anyway, we had to bail on our last Chicago show, but we're coming back with a real cool one that we're excited about with Drain, actually. I see on your shirt there.
Right here,
Hell yeah. And then a few other things. We're doing a big record release show in Brooklyn in June. We're doing a Philly headliner,
Mm-hmm.
similar to LA, where like our last Philly show was one of the best shows we've ever had. So we're excited to go back and play for them again. They've always taken care of us, whether it's a This Is Hardcore or a church show. Philly's always been good to us. We're excited about that one too.
Awesome. Had the pandemic not happened, would you guys have kind of maintained your previous kind of like album cycle? Because you used to kind of do like 3-4 years. Every 3-4 years you guys would drop like a full length or whatnot. And obviously, since we did have like a pause in time, you guys, I don't necessarily count that, but it technically has been 6 years since
Yeah.
the
So
2017 album. So
it was 5 years, I believe, between Cost of Living and Thousand Mile Stare, and then yeah, it'll be 6 years between Thousand Mile Stare and this new one. Um, Honestly, I don't. I think one of the silver linings and benefits of the pandemic was being able to kind of set the time aside to to write more music. And I know we all wanted to kind of still put the same amount of energy that we'd always put into the band. And if that wasn't playing shows for a year and a half there, that turned into practicing and writing and committing to do a record. So it kind of I'm not going to say if it wasn't for the pandemic, it wouldn't have happened,
right.
but it certainly made it made it more of a priority and gave all of us kind of like a little more purpose during that time,
Yeah.
because nobody's doing shit, nobody's got anything going on. you know Band practice sometimes can be can feel like an obligation, something you have to do before a show or
Yeah.
something like that. But it quickly became like the most fun, exciting thing that we had going on that week. We get to see our friends when things were opening up and feeling a little safer, and fucking play guitar loud again.
Yeah.
And start making something new. So it really gave us a time that we may not have otherwise had to really commit and organize new material that we felt good about, and put out another record.
Yeah. How long did it guys take you to write? Because you said you recorded it last year. So were you obviously you probably weren't in a rush because you didn't know at that particular time, when you would be able to hit the studio or get back into the normal swing of things. But how long did it take to write the record for you guys? And was it like a lot of deliberating on what to make, what makes the record and what doesn't make the record before recording?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part. I guess me and Dan, our drummer, started getting together in around June of 2020. We were the first to, when things were kind of opening back up in New York and feeling safer in New York. Dan and I were getting together in the practice space and working on some material that I had built up while I was just home by myself with a guitar. And we started working on stuff, yeah, like June of 2020. Mostly the two of us. The other guys started joining in closer to the end of the year, in December. By that time, we had about half the record written, maybe 4 or 5 of the 10 songs. We're in a good spot and laid out. And once the other guys started, had the ability to start coming to practice more, we kind of made a decision and committed, like, all right, like, let's do this. Like, at that point, we had enough material where we could have gone either way on it. It could have been an EP that came out a little sooner, or we could, if we thought we still had the material, which I believe that we did, let's commit and do another LP. Which that was kind of a decision too. I think we didn't really know what to do, honestly. Like, we didn't feel like we really needed to put out another record, period.
Right.
I don't think but it felt like people wanted it. Like, every time we would post anything related to the band, whether it was like a shirt or a show or a one of the charity things we were doing during the pandemic, like, comments were always like, new music when, new record, what's going, like, so it felt like there was a demand for it. But ultimately we decided on an LP. I don't know, we're kind of like an LP band. Everything we've done more split 7 inches than any band needs to do already. So
Yeah.
That format is kind of ran its course for us. So yeah, we just committed and said, let's spend the rest of this year getting this material together and put together an LP.
Yeah. Is it hard to kind of juggle the wanting to do that with the not having to do that? With the way that like Incendiary is set up, because like obviously you said it's not that it's not a big main focus for you guys, but it kind of feels more like it is like a side passion project thing that you guys do
Sure.
when you feel the need to do that.
yeah, that's really it. Like there was nothing like pushing us to do it other than like us wanting to. You know what I mean? Like I said, like we were excited about getting
Hmm.
together and writing again, and we had the material, and it was falling into a good place. Um, I think it can be hard sometimes to to accelerate things and get on a page, get things done without a deadline. So once we were kind of serious about it, we started thinking about studios and where to record and looking at times, which was a little tricky just because our schedules personally are fucking nuts and difficult
Yeah.
to work with for most producers, but also like everybody was recording during that time because it was the only thing you could really do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was we found some time later, the following May, and once we had like that committed and like a deadline, that kind of like forces things to happen and forces things to get done,
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I think, we naturally felt like we wanted to be doing it, and then having that deadline really kind of made it happen.
Yeah. And also trying to get time with Will Putney, for those who don't know. But Will Putney, getting time with Will is probably a little hard too, because he's high in demand these last couple of years in
Sure
general.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't thank and praise Will enough. He is the man. He really felt like, an extra member of the band, an extension of the band. He's been a trusted advisor. Like when we were, you know, he was the first phone call, obviously, when we were getting ready to do this. And, I told him this too, like at the time, like we weren't sure like who we wanted to record it because we knew we wanted it to be we knew we wanted it to be delivered a little differently, and we were just thinking of ways how do we distance it from the prior record.
Yeah.
And one of those things obviously could be production, recognizing that incendiary songs are largely incendiary songs, so a change in production might help us accomplish that. But after talking to Will, like he wanted to do it, like he's like, no, I can make this record for you guys. I know what you want to do. Like, and it was hard to deny, just his kind of like desire and like passion to work with us. It was flattering and humbling. And, it was, again, I've said it before, but like recording is my least favorite part of doing bands.
Yeah.
And recording with him is some of the coolest shit I've ever done in my life. It's always so fun and comfortable, and we get great stuff out of it. And yeah, ever since we've started working with him, like he just feels like he's in it with you and
Yeah.
cares as much as you do, and but at the same time is also able to make very objective, unbiased, opinions and feedback and suggestions in the process, which ultimately elevate the whole thing and make for a better record.
Yeah. When did you guys get linked up with him? He worked on the previous record, but did you guys get linked up previously to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, Will is like a New Jersey East Coast hardcore
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, how did you guys
So
meet? Was it through bands or just through local scenes
yeah,
or something? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, exactly. Like it was. I mean, we have a million mutual friends
Right.
in
Right. Right.
similar circles, but the way we actually met was, um, Brendan, our vocalist, got asked to do a guest vocal spot on an Acacia Strain record
Oh, cool.
in like I think it was like maybe 9 years
Yeah.
ago or
Yeah.
so by
Back in the
now.
day.
The name of the record escapes me, but anyway, he got invited to do a guest spot. Will was recording it at his studio in New Jersey, and I took the ride with Brendan out there to go hang out while he did it. We met Will, and he was an Incendiary fan. We brought him some merch. He was stoked. The track that Brendan did came out awesome, and when it was time to do our next record at the time, which was Thousand Mile Stare, he was like the Hail Mary kind of the like you don't get what you don't ask for. Let's just ask,
Yeah.
let's just ask. Not really thinking that he'd be down to do it, or he could do it at a rate that we were going to be able to afford. And he was down. He was down. He was excited about it. It was, and like, I mean what I say. It was the best experience I'd ever had up until that point. We work largely on nights and long weekends, and we were able to kind of just lock into a studio and stay there and really be like invested in it more than we'd really ever done in the past.
Mhm.
Where we'd just be going in at night and going home. There, we were able to kind of stay at the studio.
It's like a full experience, like a full
Yeah,
recording experience.
yeah, I felt like I was in fucking Chili Peppers or something for a couple weekends there. Like,
Yeah. Hell yeah.
but
Go ahead.
yeah,
Finish,
it was
finish up.
awesome.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if you had more to say. Yeah, so like, what we've had Will on the podcast before, I think during the pandemic actually. What is the like when you get in with him? Like, say, like you said, like it's a Hail Mary kind of request, and even though you kind of have some kind of connections with him, and obviously I'm asking you, but you may not even know his, his whatever he however he
His
does
resume?
it. Yeah, no, not his resume. Whatever
Process?
there it is, his process. As to picking bands, like who he selects. But like, do you know like if you're in, like once you're in, like you're always in? Like if he enjoys working with you, he'll always make time for you. You just have to find that time within his schedule at some point, or
I mean, I can only speak from my experience, and from my experience, yeah,
okay,
yeah, we got along great with him. It's just like, yeah, it just felt like seeing an old friend again when we got back together and work and started working again. And it it makes the whole thing easier when you kind of like trust the hands that you're in. And he won my trust very early on in on the last record that we did with him,
hmm
our first record with Will. That was a Miles Dare. I had heard Will going into that. I'd heard that he was like very hands on with the material and this and that, and like I am admittedly, a little
against that per se.
no, just like I know, like I get very married to my
No,
ideas, and
100%.
I recognize that. But I was like, damn, I wonder how that's gonna go. But dude, I'm telling you, like literally, like the first two suggestions that he had were like obviously way better,
Yeah.
and I was like, yep, that's obviously what we should do. So like, he just won my trust right away.
So kind of like
And then it was easy to kind of like, yeah,
yeah. So it kind of was easy for you to take a back seat and let someone
mhm,
else,
exactly. I'm
handle
like,
your
this
baby
guy's
for a
got it.
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and even with this new one, we explained what we wanted to do. We wanted it to be a little harsher, a little more aggressive. We thought the material was coming out that way, and a lot of it was on purpose. I think Incendiary being an aging hardcore band going into its fourth LP, I think an expectation could be that it's getting a little more anthemic and whoa whoa whoa, and these guys are playing a lot of Euro festivals now, so maybe it's getting a little it's getting a little more, the edges are going dull a little bit,
hmm
and we were like, nah, we got to go the other way from that. Like, let's make it sharper, harsher, more aggressive in the songs and in the production and everything. And he just got understood the assignment from like day one.
Yeah.
Like, same thing again. Like, we kind of gave him like a new idea and a new set of guidelines that we were trying to work with, and he just nailed it from the start, and it made it very easy for us to kind of trust him from there on out.
Yeah. Did you really feel like you just said, like, did you really feel like you got that feedback from fans that you were headed in that direction and you guys needed to kind of course correct?
No, I can only speak for like how I
Okay,
interpret
okay.
bands.
Because I was saying,
What I
I didn't
see.
really hear that in the rustlings of the internet the last couple of years or anything. So
Yeah, maybe that's in my head then, but that's what I always thought. I mean, think about it. Like when I think of like hardcore bands that are putting out
but you're
several
also
LPs,
you're
like it
also
gets a
from
little more.
but you're
Yeah,
from New York, and hardcore is also for the most part from New York too. So growing up in New York, hardcore, even that form of hardcore is different. And no offense to the kind of hardcore you guys play, so
yeah.
it's evolved in ways, and so yeah, I guess being a student of hardcore and a resident of New York in general, you may feel like you have to have that like grit and like always be
Yeah.
sharp, and I understand
Mhm.
that, but I don't think it ever came off like soft at
Yeah, I
all.
didn't want anybody to think that we're getting slow with age. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like I want to show like we still fucking bring it.
yeah.
And it's also cool like having the record was written during the pandemic, and I'm not going to say it's like a pandemic record in any way, but like it is cool and interesting to have something now that we made during that time that kind of like documents where we were at
hmm
during all that. And if it just so happened to come out a little more aggressive and harsher and bleaker, maybe that's what we were going through,
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people came out with darker, bleaker
yeah.
albums after the pandemic for sure. So is Will like your connection to Knock Loose? I know you were saying like you were going to play with Knock Loose, but obviously Will's recorded them, and so I didn't know
Trying
if
to
like
think. Um, He definitely part of the connection. I'm not sure, man. Those kids have just been super cool and
Oh yeah.
supportive of Incendiary forever. Like, um, I'm trying to think. It kind of escapes me how we met those kids. Oh, actually, I remember. It was actually at Hellfest in Europe in 2017. I think we
Mm.
were on the same stage, and those things. Everybody kind of pulls up their vans to the back of the stage. And they were just kind of kicking around, and we ended up hitting it off with them. And actually, at LDB Fest in 2022,
So you played both
yeah,
21 and 22, I think, right?
no, we only did it once.
Okay.
I guess it would have been 22 then, yeah. Um, they had just finished recording their latest EP with Will.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, I think, the first band or one of the first bands that recorded in Will's new studio. And at LDB, it was LDB Fest and then going right to record with Will.
Oh, cool.
So we saw them at LDB and they were telling us how sick his new studio was and how happy they were with everything. So yeah, that's definitely part of the connection. And they got us very excited about going back to record with Will again. But I mean, they are just like they're fucking supportive, stoked on hardcore kids still,
Yeah, yeah.
and they just murdered it on Coachella.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
sure
what I was gonna
everybody
bring
saw
up.
that.
Yeah, I was gonna bring
Yeah,
that up.
dude, like unbelievable, and like they're just a band where like you want to see them win.
Yeah, of
Like
course.
you feel like they're doing it for everybody, and like I know there's been hardcore bands and bands that come from hardcore that have played Coachella more recently over the last 3 to 5 years or so, but like sonically, Knock Loose is by far the most, to me at least, like sonically authentic to hardcore. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
screaming fucking vocals
Yeah.
nonstop. It's super relentlessly heavy music, and like no image or no angle or anything like that. And it's hardcore presented very authentically to that audience for what might be one of if not the first time, and getting a hardcore response at that level. So
Yeah.
it definitely, it was super impressive to see, and like again, you just want to see him win, and you couldn't be happier for him.
Yeah, they're not necessarily like the only hardcore band that's ever played, or a heavy band that's ever played Coachella. And I don't necessarily pay attention to Coachella that often. It's on the other side of the country for me, and I've never even been to it or cared really to go. But
Yeah,
they've, I don't know if another heavy band,
that's what I mean.
a
Yeah,
heavy band is like headlined, or not headlined, but like played late in the evening. Like when they live streamed their set not this past weekend, but the weekend prior. That was like crazy. And I think, and everyone, there's a lot of reporting going on about, hardcore at Coachella, and the crowd and the audience and the mosh pit was like the biggest mosh pit Coachella has seen, which that is a feat, but also I don't necessarily know how many mosh pits go on in Coachella in general,
yeah.
so I don't know, what
It looked
level it
it
is.
looked
No, it was,
crazy. I mean,
yeah, it was insane. I
yeah,
watched most of it, but it is insane kind of also to see how it was the second weekend, because clearly, the audience was bigger the second weekend around because all that publicity that they had garnished
yeah.
the weekend before, with all the outlets sharing the stuff and whatnot. But
That's
yeah,
actually a good point. I didn't really think of that. Like you kind of saw like the real time impact of
mm-hmm,
that. People seeing weekend one and being like, "Damn, that looked crazy. I need to
mm-hmm.
see that. I need to be part of that for weekend two."
Well, and online too, because obviously you have people that are just like people that aren't into hardcore that are just like searching the live streams on Coachella because they had multiple different live streams, and you may not want to watch the DJ this particular moment, or you may not want to watch a rap person or an indie band, but on this other channel you have like complete and utter fucking chaos going on, and
Yeah,
I would want to know how many people just didn't know what to expect, and they're in the crowd just waiting for like another
waiting
act.
for Blink 182.
Yeah, waiting for another act or something
spin
like
kicked
that.
in the mouth.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure that happened.
yeah. It's funny though, because I like to ask, and you're probably one of the better groups to ask because you guys are from that area of the world where hardcore kind of was birthed for the most part in the States. It's got to be kind of crazy to see like where it's come. Not even just for Knock Loose, but obviously because you have ties with Knock Loose for the last couple of years, you've been able to really watch them close-handedly almost grow
Sure.
into whatever the hell monster they are now. But I mean, like hardcore in general too. You've also been able to watch the ups and downs of that, that trend, for years and years. And right now, it's like insanely huge.
For sure. I think, yeah, and I'm a little older. I've been
We're all older, right?
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen a few waves of things go, and yeah, like yes, we are from New York, but more specifically Long Island, which in my kind of like early to prime like show going days, like things were exploding on Long Island, like the Taking Back Sunday, Brand New, Glassjaw, like Movie Life, like things were exploding. Like I was seeing bands that I had literally just seen play a bowling alley on MTV like the next month.
Yeah.
So I've seen a wave like that, and maybe that's not necessarily all like defined as hardcore, but it was definitely coming from
It's in the
all
vein.
those bands.
It's in the vein.
Yeah,
of it,
and make no mistake, like those bands all came from like the hardcore subculture and scene on Long Island.
That's usually how it happens.
Yeah,
You find all these bands, and they'll be fans of heavy bands or whatever, but they may go write like more of a post-hardcore or an emo styled record, and it's
and like the hardcore subculture and the hardcore scene also like offers the infrastructure for like any type of artist or band or musician or whatever. Like if you're indie singer songwriter guy, like you don't really know how to book your own shows, but like if you can get plugged in with the guy booking the On the Might of Prince's show or something, that might make sense for you, and now you have a show and get kind of swept up in that whole thing. So I think even if sonically a lot of those bands may not be hardcore, like having the infrastructure of shows and scenes and that kind of like machine behind you on Long Island, I think helped get bands who maybe didn't sound hardcore, but like came up from that scene, got them elevated and got them the experience they need to take a band out.
Yeah. Seeing it for such a long period of time and the ups and downs and the popularity growth and loss of popularity over the years, what level do you personally think, Brian, that hardcore can get without selling out? Like how big do you think hardcore can really get without being like mainstream?
You mean like relative to where it is today, or just
Maybe in general with like other genres.
Yeah, like I mean, like I don't think it's outrageous to say that. Like I think it's bigger now than like literally ever.
Oh, of course, I 100% agree.
Right? Like so, and to be honest, I think I don't. If you asked me like a year ago, I might be able to give you an answer. But like after the last year, since Turnstile and Knock Loose, there is no ceiling. Like I don't know what else it could be. Like
you can get Taco Bell commercials, and you can almost headline Coachella. Yeah,
there is no ceiling that I can see now.
I'm just asking because
it seems like anything's possible.
We gotta get more money in this little world.
I know. You guys
hardcore
are OGs here. I know.
No, not we do. We all have to get more revenue into the hardcore world so bands can further their art and their and play more shows and not have to. Because what I think about all the time is we do have these bands that last 20 years like Incendiary and all these other like I keep saying like Every Time I Die, but they're no longer one of those bands, so I can't really use them as an example. But bands like that were able to withstand like a 20-year career. But I also think about like all the bands that just put out like an EP or a 7-inch or one album, and they were around for 3, 4, 5 years, and they just couldn't make enough money on the road or this, that, the other, and they kind of gave it up, and some of those bands and some of those albums are top tier hardcore albums or metalcore albums, you know what I mean? And it's just like, how can we put hardcore in front of enough people to maintain it, enough
and
activity.
Support everybody, to keep it going. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, like with Incendiary, like one of the, I'm not gonna say benefit, but like we don't like we've never relied on the band as income, like we all have our lives established kind of outside of this, and that's very like liberating. We can do things that maybe don't make sense, or we just add up. Like what I'm trying to say is like I can see how difficult it is for someone who is relying on this to pay bills and make rent and support people at home. And you're 100% right. Like there's not it doesn't seem like there's enough to go around, and especially if you're living in New York or
Right.
or Brooklyn or New York City, it's damn near impossible. But yeah, you're right though, man. With the heights it's been taken to, hopefully we start seeing some of the economy of it become a little more equitable for everybody involved.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of start seeing little thing like hardcore being represented in other areas of like big major rock festivals. Like you'll have like the Danny Wilmer festivals like Rockville and Sonic Temple and Incarceration, and you'll have other big rock shows that pop or rock festivals that pop up all over. Like Converge is playing Rockville or the Danny Wilmer festivals, right? And they're playing Rockville, which is an hour away from here in Daytona. But like last night, I looked up the schedule because they released like the schedule and the stage and all that stuff, what stages, what bands are playing on what stage. And I'm like, and I'm a Converge fan, longtime Converge fan, and here I am looking, and I'm like, oh, they're going to be playing the smallest stage at the entire show. But again, that's one of the bands that I'm going more to see, and it just like how can we get Converge to maybe like play a different stage?
Yeah, I mean that's the first step, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, getting them on the show is starting. And like, listen, no better band than Converge to be someone's entry point to hardcore, especially if it's going to be seeing a band live. I think that's how it happens. Somebody's there to see. I don't know who fucking plays that thing, but
Slipknot.
Slipknot,
every fucking
sure.
time, every fucking
yeah,
time.
Somebody's going to see Slipknot and then walk past the stage and see Converge doing their thing live. Like it's going to be hard not to be impressed and want to find out more about that.
How as a hardcore kid that's grown up in the hardcore scene, have you noticed how Slipknot has infiltrated the sound of hardcore and metal over the years?
Like I think you're asking the wrong guy for that. Like I'm not like
I don't think you're a fan of Slipknot, but obviously the kids.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Like I don't like know it enough to be able to kind of recognize if those references are there.
I get you. I think one of the
I think they're definitely like normalized. Like to me, as when I was a shithead hardcore kid in late high school, Slipknot, like
not having it.
You're like fucking not allowed.
It's gatekeeping all day long back in the day, and I remember it.
Yeah, and like part of it was like that kind of attitude that was around then. But like also like it was a fucking tough sell. Like I saw the masks and the outfits, and I was out. I didn't even have to hear a fucking note. I was out. Now though, that to me is brilliant. The mask shit is brilliant.
Yeah, you stood out. It was a gimmick for sure. For sure,
yeah,
it was
like
a good.
Now, but dude, think about it now. Like one of my biggest things is when I see like a band play, especially a hardcore band or any type of heavy band, that when the music needs to be delivered with like a youthful energy or some kind of like aggressive energy.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going.
Seeing like an aging band looking old and looking weathered and looking haggard, like it doesn't fucking connect, and it really makes it hard to like want to still go see that live or enjoy it when I do see it live. Slipknot with those masks, they're timeless, they're ageless. They look exactly the same,
and they can change it like they have over the years.
And they make it a thing every record. It's like, what's the new mask going to be? Like, I think it's fucking brilliant now. Like, there's still not much in their music for me, and I've gone back and checked out the first record or two semi recently.
That's all you got to do, Brian. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, it was cool. It was like genuinely better than I expected it to be. Yeah, the mask shit, the thing that really turned me off to begin with, now I think is like the coolest part of the band to me. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to see the Incendiary lineup on this current tour that's going out in June, and new mask, which you guys are going to have popping mask-wise for you guys on the live show. That'd be good.
Yeah, we'll see what we can come up with by then.
Yeah, but you're right. You can't all like. It's a good point that you brought up that I never even thought about, like the youthful delivery, because you can't always be like Vinny Stigma from Agnostic Front, who seems not to age at all.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, but that guy is right. There is no fucking playbook for how to be an aging hardcore guy in your 60s. That guy every day. That guy is writing that playbook.
Yeah,
and legend.
Yeah, that's crazy. Speaking of which, not speaking of which, but speaking of old time hardcore, how'd you kind of get into hardcore? Like, how'd you bite your teeth into it?
Yeah, I mean, I was into, like many people my generation, I guess. I was into like Green Day, Nirvana, like rock, like heavier rock music was
Yeah, alternative or whatever.
mainstream. That was on the radio in my parents' car. So I was into stuff like that. That eventually took me to more metal stuff, Pantera, Slayer, Metallica. Um, and then, you know, once I got into like, once I started hearing like the Roadrunner Records type stuff,
Oh man, you and
stuff,
I.
yeah, stuff like that kind of made it a little more tangible. Like when I learned that Vision of Disorder, VOD, was from Long Island, but they had a CD that was on the same fucking poster as
Mm,
like Sepultura and like
yeah,
and all this other shit. I was like, oh my god, like you can be from Long Island and like like have a real CD and do that. And it made it like very tangible. So
yeah.
that kind of got me looking for more. And there was a I probably told this on a million interviews by now, but like there was a record store that I just happened to grow up very close to, called None of the Above Records in Center Reach, and they like specialized in punk and hardcore and local
Mm,
heavy alternative music. And the sign outside just said alternative music. And again, walking distance before I drove. And Long Island is not a walking
yeah,
city
yeah,
by any means. So, I'm 13, 14 years old. And I can walk to this record store. And I went in looking for, Green Day and Nirvana CDs. And I came out with a fucking Earth Crisis Victory sampler and just
yeah.
had had access to all this stuff at an early age. And that kind of like discovery part of it was a lot of like, obviously I was drawn to the music, but like
Hmm.
I really enjoyed how hard it was to find bands and find music, if that makes sense.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I don't know, I kind of miss that. Like
Oh
you
yeah. I was just going to ask you. That was like my lead in to the next couple of
Yeah.
questions. Yeah, yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, like it was fun. Like, I'd get a flyer on the way out of the show and like,
Hmm.
oh, this band's logo looks cool. And then the next time I went to the record store, try to find that record, or like, a record that looked like that one. And like, oh, the guy in this 7 inch is wearing a fucking, I don't know, 1 for 1 t-shirt. I gotta find what that band's about. And like, part of that like hunt and discovery really made it kind of like a full-time hobby for me
Yeah,
before I was even really able to go to shows. I was just, enjoyed that and enjoyed feeling like I
yeah.
had this, like I was in on this on my own little thing.
That's kind of like the same for me. I mean, like I dabbled in the Roadrunner bands because I'm from Jacksonville, and you had Vision Disorder. I had Limp Bizkit, and
Yeah, true.
Limp Bizkit had records. They're from here, and they had records in the store that I could go to, and so
Yeah.
like, in Roadrunner too, I went down that rabbit hole too, and then eventually, I found your buddy's Glassjaw and Hatebreed,
Yep.
and
There you go.
that changed my life to this trajectory from new metal, and it's not been the same since. But I definitely was going to ask you about like the sampler thing, and like it just seemed like it's so easy to find music these days, and like the younger generation, is doing just fine finding all these bands and whatnot. And some could argue that there's too many bands to even search through because there are literally a
Yeah.
million bands popping out each day, whether on Bandcamp or some other kind of song platform or music platform. But like, there's something to be said about like getting those free samplers, and like, because you would take that and you would actually listen to it. It's not like
Yeah.
someone telling you to check out a song and you can go stream it. You have this physical thing that you had, whether it was like following you around or something like that in your head, that you're like, I have to check it out or whatnot.
Yeah.
You couldn't really just toss it aside. I mean, you could definitely, but it's physical. It's in the real world. You have to look at it and handle it.
Yeah. And like I think about it like, I've often thought like I remember like buying records and like getting new music was like an investment.
Hmm.
Like before I like
You
had
couldn't
a
even know
job
what the
or
record, yeah,
anything.
and you wouldn't even know what the record sounded like
Yeah,
until,
like I'm talking, I'm taking my like lawn mowing money, to None of the Above, and like buying, maybe I had enough for like one CD a week, right?
yeah,
And like I would spend that week like finding something in that record I liked. If I invested in that and that was like the only, sunk all my money at the time into a record,
mm,
like, you know, I would I had to find something I liked because I invested into it.
right,
That really kind
right.
of made, some records that like on first listen, now like on Spotify, if I'm not feeling it in the first fucking 30 seconds of the first song, I'm out.
And
But
that's,
like
I think that's
there I'm
so,
like,
as a
all right,
detriment,
I'm
as a
sitting there with the
detriment, I
fucking,
think.
yeah, definitely. Like I'm sitting there with the CD book, listening to it like that was what I was doing. I was listening to music was like an active
Mm.
activity. Like it wasn't something I was doing while I'm commuting or like
Hmm.
while I'm exercising or, while I'm walking to get coffee. Like I was sitting there in front of the fucking CD player with headphones on and the booklet, like actively taking it all in and finding something I liked in this. And, you know, I wonder if it's like possible now for people to, create as strong connections with artists and records
Mm.
without doing that. Like, can you still have like a favorite artist and be, as into bands as, as we were back then, because
Part,
it's a little more, transient.
yeah, yeah, and I totally could agree with you, and I see where you're coming from. But I think also with with the addition of like, as bad as it is, like social media and the internet and stuff like that, I think that they do
Yeah,
become fans because they can see, like, again,
it's true.
they can
Yeah,
see
you get a
more of the
bigger glimpse
band,
into their life.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
have more connection with them.
Yeah,
However,
that's true, actually. You feel like you know these people.
right, and you may not even
Yeah.
like the music at that point. You just may like the guys or the band or the people
True.
in the
Yeah,
band,
you're
and
right.
you just want to support them. But yeah, to go back to what you're saying and like sitting with an album for like 40 minutes or an hour,
Yeah.
that is, you do have to like force yourself to like a lot of those things because like,
I'll give
go ahead.
the best example I can give is Brothers Keeper. Do you remember that band?
Oh yeah, 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 Trustco.
Buzzkill, right. I bought the Brothers Keeper record, one with the guy with the hoodie on the cover. I'm like, all right, this is gonna be sick. The cover of this record looks awesome. This
Wasn't
looks
sick at
like
the first listen, huh?
every cool person I've seen at a show looks like this guy. Um, and no, at first I was like, oh man, what did I do? And
Yeah.
then I fucking ate shit for a while, and eventually I was like, all right, yeah, this guy's voice is kind of like Snapcase. I can get into
But that
that.
happens all the time.
Yeah,
But that happened all the time. It doesn't happen now currently all the time.
no, that's what I mean. Now I'm making the kind of snap judgments.
Right.
I'm for sure guilty of it. Like,
Well, I think
you
everyone
know,
is because of the internet and your attention span is so fucking short these days. But like that's why pop music is so easy for a lot of people. Like you can listen to a Taylor Swift song or insert pop name there. You can and that stuff's been made for you to like it instantly. But a lot of those songs, a lot of those albums don't stay with you for the longevity of like years and years
yeah,
to come. Whereas the albums that you sit there and you force yourself to listen to, like
yeah,
black metal is one of those things that I never really was into until like the last handful of years. I like subjected myself to it enough peripherally to where like it doesn't sound all like trash to me anymore. Like I can sit through a lot of black metal these days, whereas I couldn't before. So,
yeah,
it's just, you have to get with something, and then it eventually permeate your your subconscious to where you are thinking
yeah. Or maybe
about it
like
or
your
liking it.
tastes
Yeah, yeah.
evolve. Like, Suffocation is a good example of that for me. Like, death metal band from Long Island.
Hmm.
We recorded our first LP, Crusade, at a studio with Joe Sincata, who did a bunch of Suffocation records around that time, and was their sound guy for a while. And those guys were always in the studio and coming through, and like I remember like recognizing and realizing like, oh, these guys are like fucking legends around here. And I would go home and like try to check out the songs, and like it was too fucking above my
Right,
head
right,
at the time. I was like, this is for sure brutal and heavy, but like I'm not there yet,
right. For
you
you, yeah.
know. But then fast forward, 6, 7, 8 years later, I started getting into more like that stuff started making more sense to me, and the like intensity of it and the technicality of it was more challenging to me, and like I appreciated that, and that's what kind of like drew me into it. So
Mm.
while I had always kind of like respected their place in history and like understood that they were a known like legendary band from my town and from my area, um, it didn't like the music didn't actually connect with me until later in life, and now
Yeah.
they're like one of my favorite bands ever.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people have the same, situation happen to them. If you're willing enough, and again, this may be for someone who's just like a music person, whereas obviously, like, you play music, you're in a band, you've had a long relationship with music, you're a music guy, you appreciate it more so than the average person does. So, like, you're willing to go back and listen to something that you probably
Yeah,
didn't like back in the day. And I think, I mean, I'll do that with bands that I've only liked certain albums of or something like that. Like Hatebreed, I didn't necessarily like Under the Knife or Satisfaction as much, but then
you
Perseverance
didn't
comes
like Satisfaction as
as
much.
much. as like
Well, what was your entry point? You came in at Perseverance?
no, right before. So like my friends are all showing me Satisfaction and Under the Knife,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And like yeah, and like it just I could have been a snob for the recording, like the way because I was coming from like Ronin Records and everything's sounding at the time more polished and not as
Yeah.
like DIY. So you have the
That's fair,
sound
yeah.
of the recording and the mastering and the production on those albums, but then you have Perseverance come out and that's a totally different level. And then technically it's kind of like the same band, right? Like there might be minute changes in sound from record to record, but same band. But now as I've gotten older, like I steered clear. I didn't steer clear, but like I wandered away from hardcore and went more into like the metalcore world for like a big part of my like early 20s and stuff like that. And then in the last 10 years, it's just been more hardcore because
Yeah.
I just like started going back to more of my roots because I grew up going to local hardcore shows and local punk shows. There weren't like metal bands playing around here or anything like that. So I grew up on that, and then it's just even going to shows and festivals and going around the country and being a part of these events and stuff like that, I'm always just more attracted to the hardcore bands. Like it's just more of a wild scene, I guess. It reminds me more of like those punk shows I used to go at, like how like someone's house or like
Yeah.
and I still go to house shows too if there's one available. But like just reminds me of a more youthful kind of situation and less bullshit. Like like
Yeah.
metal and metalcore kind of does have like a lot of bullshit in the industry behind them with record labels and bands and stuff like that. It just seems more upfront with hardcore.
Yeah. Yeah. With I mean, I was always
No
drawn
offense to
hardcore.
anyone, no shade to anybody or anything. I'm just saying my
No,
personal,
no, it's just
yeah.
different flavors.
Yeah.
I was always drawn to hardcore too because the way it was like presented to me, especially on Long Island, like there was like almost no image or fashion or anything like attached to it. Like,
Yeah.
I really like, you know, metalheads. I would see metalhead dudes and be like leather jackets and fucking long hair and crazy
Yeah.
boots and shit. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. And I would same thing with like punk dudes, like fucking charged mohawks and like million patches and shit.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, that's a lot. Like, yeah, but hardcore, I saw people that like, oh, that looks like, the guy I go to high school with, or like that looks like the guy I see, at the mall walking around, right? That looks like the guy I see skateboarding behind Walmart. Like
Yeah.
they just look like regular fucking people like I look like, and then get up there, kill a set, have a crazy pile-on, sing along, people beating the shit out of each other while they play. They get off stage and they look exactly the same. Like I was really drawn to that kind of like almost like subversive, but almost like it's like a dual, like a
Oh
like
yeah.
double identity. You
Yeah.
know, like oh, you don't have to like have a crazy look, or I don't want to call it a costume. I'm refraining from calling it a costume. But
Create
like
a
you don't
character.
have to have like I didn't have the energy to sit around sewing shit onto my jacket or like
Right.
doing growing a crazy hairdo. Like I just wanted to fucking go to a show and mosh and sing along and shit. And yeah, I think some of that the absence of the fashion and the image, although it has its own fashion
Right.
associated with it, but I don't know, it just seemed more casual. Like I really like that. Like it looks like everyday people just getting up there doing it,
Yeah.
getting off stage and then continuing to live their lives.
I think I have to agree with you on that because I think that's and subliminally I think that's probably the same reason why I kind of gravitated more towards it because it is more like a there is no kind of like outfit that you have to have for it or anything, and it's more of a just anyone do whatever you want.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
I didn't really think of it that way.
There obviously is
Sex,
everybody's wearing Vans sneakers, right?
Right.
Like they're
a lot of shaved heads,
are.
a lot of shaved heads, a lot of this and the
Yeah.
other tattoos, but you can
But
also
again, my
be
entry point, I'm like, oh man, that guy's fucking hoodies from the Gap, man. I know where that is. Like, like, it just seemed more tangible to me. I
and
guess
there
is
are
what I'm saying.
and there are cool looks within the hardcore world, like you were saying. Like that's why you got the Brothers Keeper CD or album because you're like,
Yeah,
hey, that
that
guy
guy
looks
looked
like
cool.
one of the cool dudes at the show. I'm gonna fucking do that.
Yeah.
So there are outfits that are in hardcore, but I think it's like you said, like if you're into metal or if you were into metal at the time and you had this specific like you carried yourself as a metalhead, you had long hair and you probably dressed a certain way, people could know that you are into that outside of that. And I think sometimes like taking the time to sew like stuff on your battle vest or putting spikes on your arms and jackets and whatever, that's also like I don't want to say conforming, but also kind of like joining into this, like you're buying into this look and buying into this vibe, whereas you just can't, like, how much of that is yourself, or how much are you just trying to fit in with the scene? So hardcore seemed like it was a bunch of just random ass, at least in my time, I like, early 2000s, late 90s, here in fucking North Florida, which is totally different than what you were experiencing at that time there. But
let's also not forget that Long Island also within hardcore, had a very high profile fashion core movement.
Oh yes,
that
I bought into that.
Had a lot of code and style attached to it.
Yeah. I definitely bought into some fashion core bands every now and then. That was fun back in the day.
Some of the music was cool. I went to plenty of the shows. But yeah, that kind of permeated itself into hardcore on Long Island too. So I saw a lot of that.
Thanks, California.
I don't know if we circle back to your earlier question about like, where do you see it going, and like how much bigger can it get?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was also like around this time, like shit was pretty fucking big, and like the Trust Kill records, Feral records, like Ozfest, like
sounds really bad.
Hardcore bands that were playing the VFW were like on Ozfest playing like stadium parking lots.
Well, you had Hellfest too in New York. You had the Hellfest, festival, the U.S. Hellfest festival in Syracuse, and then eventually New Jersey.
Yeah, but like I went to a few Ozfests where I would see like, Hatebreed was I guess up there at that point, but I would see Unearth and Every Time I Die and Black Dahlia Murder, Terror in some cases. Like you would see bands that like, oh, I saw them at the hardcore show at the VFW, but now they're on a fucking stadium parking lot tour, and their videos on MTV too. So like, it did have a pretty big moment. I guess that's like 20 years ago by now. So it kind of it's ebbed and flows, and I think the trajectory it's on right now though is bigger than all of that.
I think because I agree with you, and I want to say, in my own kind of like, what I think happened, and there's no water. I can't hold any water in this your theory, but I think MTV did get involved. MTV started playing videos on MTV2, and you'd hear like certain bands in between, like you'd have like clips of their song in like Road Rules or Real World in the background during like a fight scene or some wild ass shot or whatever. And I want to say like record labels started seeing like money to be made. And that's where you start seeing like some clean singing stuff and like metalcore start coming up. But you also see like a cash grab situation where like
100%.
Hot Topic was just like basically like the metalcore store for a long time. And I think that kind of really did kill a lot of people who were into it at that time. And they just kind of moved on. And again, a lot of people probably had kids and relationships and got real, I don't want to say real jobs, but got, other jobs.
Careers,
that took up more time than just part-time gigs. And then that kind of took away from the actual audience at that time, and then it was just replaced by an audience that was kind of like, liking things that weren't necessarily core things to like the scene that we were privy to. But that being said, I think it failed after a couple of years, and you had a very big lull of like metalcore and maybe even hardcore. But I think now that you have this younger generation coming in and filling in the gaps, because now we're seeing a resurgence in just like a population, is just replacing the old population is being replaced by the new younger population, right? So you're starting to see just like a plethora of just like other sounding hardcore, like, and I honestly think like nu metal has certainly influenced hardcore greatly in these last couple of years. I think Knock Loose is big into that, and I know I argue with people all the time, but Knock Loose, and this is not a fucking negative comment. I love nu metal, and I love Knock Loose. But
I can tell that's your.
I
loud
think,
and proud, baby.
Yeah, I got to bring it back. You know what I mean? It suffered death long time ago. Got to bring it back. But I think they do. A lot of kids grew up on fucking Slipknot and stuff like that. And there's no way that it can't impermeate the style of writing that they do now 10, 15, 5, 20 years later, So it is.
Nobody's born with a fucking Minor Threat 7-inch in their hand. Like you have to like find this shit somehow. And if you're an entry point, like mine's Green Day and Nirvana. Like eventually it got there. Like, if I was born 10 years later, it would probably be Slipknot and something else.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it does play an influence. I'm sure they would agree that. I mean, there's definitely new metal in Incendiary music. Like there's plenty of new metal that we enjoy
Yeah.
and still think is cool.
And you're from New York. You're from fucking up there. Like, I can't. E-Town Concrete to me sometimes. In Earth Crisis,
Careful,
obviously they do have like.
careful here.
I know, I
These are
know, I
fucking
know.
boys.
We're gonna
Right.
we're gonna tap dance.
Yeah.
But I brought it up a lot. Earth Crisis does have like a new metal album, and they do have new metal influences and stuff like that too. But with hip hop and hardcore coming from like the same area, it's like, you know, it was so budding in the '80s, both of those scenes, right? And they were so small. I always felt like hardcore was so related to hip hop, and you know, as I've grown up learning the history, clearly it is. But then I'm thinking like, no wonder when I hear sometimes I hear E-Time Concrete, and I'm like, what new metal band is this that I haven't heard of, you know? And I'll listen to it, and then people get all offended. I'm like, I'm not saying that in a bad way, dude. I'm just saying like they come from the same neighborhoods, you know, like hip hop and hardcore, the same neighborhood. So how can it not sound like a little bit of rap? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. If somebody in the band is going to be bringing their flavor into it, then I'm sure listens to hip hop, and yeah, like I mean, to your point, like I wish E Town was a household name in the new metal moment. They made a fucking great record,
Yeah.
Renaissance during all that great sounding record, and like sure people will people may write them off as like as the hip hop thing or whatever, but like you sit down and listen to that record, like that is some pretty advanced and impressive musicianship and playing and songwriting. They took some risks, man. There's like a ballad on there for a tough guy band from Jersey. That is a big risk to take.
Yeah.
And then there's a hard ass song with Joss the Still, like that. It's hard for me to see like listen to something. I wish they were in the conversation. Like they had a bigger that record was good enough and just as good as a lot of the stuff that blew up around then that you're talking about with the hip hop influence. That like it could have been them too.
Yeah. And again, not a knock on anybody. I just think it's funny when people get kind of like, oh, they're not like Limp Bizkit. It's like, dude, they kind of are. But I'm not saying one's better than the other or one's worse. And it's not a negative. You know, it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah,
hip hop has
at
influenced that
face
hardcore
value,
guy.
sure.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. All right, Brian, we come to the end, man. It's 7:00.
Damn. All right.
It happens quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did. We really got into a groove there.
That's what
Just you guys nerding out on some bullshit. It was fun.
That's what I like to do, man. That's why I like to have it like this. And obviously, we didn't get to explore a lot of like other things outside of the band, like I told you we might do in the beginning. But
No, it's all good.
It's great that we got to cover a lot of ground. And it's hard to cover everything within an hour, especially if we're just talking in general. And it's good to hear all the things that the guest is saying because. I'm basing a lot of what I'm talking about off of whatever the guest is talking about. That's what I try to follow the guest for and just get what I think might be good, content for a hardcore fan or incendiary fan or someone who just stumbles upon this video or audio,
Yeah, for sure. That's what it's all about.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you guys. Definitely, not you guys, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys at Incendiary. And if you've made it this far in the podcast, the album comes out June 17th. This podcast comes out May. So it's coming out. It's coming out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yeah, record's coming out May 26th.
May 26th.
May 26th is the release date. Yeah. May 26th on Closed Casket Activities. Our record release show is June 17th. That's probably where. Yeah.
I'm confused. Yes, you're right.
We're gonna let it marinate for a couple weeks and then go play it live at that show.
Awesome, man. Well, this podcast doesn't come out probably till the 26th or the week after. To be honest with you.
Oh, that would be that's cool.
So perfect timing. And then, out of curiosity, because I know like Friday is going to be an announcement for Sound and Fury. Are you guys playing Sound and Fury out there?
We are not this year.
Okay.
Scheduling didn't work out. We'd love to do it. We're doing our own LA show that actually Sound and Fury presents.
Oh, cool.
The Sound and Fury team is booking for us. Yeah, awesome. Us, Mind Force, Take Offense, a bunch of our friends. Unfortunately we couldn't this year. Would have been great with the on the back of the new record, but schedules are tough and it just didn't work out. Hopefully next year. We've been lucky enough to play that thing 3 times. Each time is better than the last.
Yeah,
and that fest keeps getting better.
I had so much fun. I've never been to the Sound and Fury Festival I'm the East Coast guy, but you're obviously not but they're on the West Coast. And there, I had so much FOMO from every fucking clip I saw from Sound and Fury this
It
year.
was on. It looked like it was on another level, and I know they're trying to top it. And like I've said it before, like they understand all angles of how to put together a successful event for everyone. And what I mean by that is like the showgoer experience is on fucking lock, but the artist and bands playing experience also on lock. Like all the shit that like you didn't even know was a pain in the ass, they already sorted for you when you get there.
Oh, yeah.
Like they take care of everything, and
Cool.
they have a special thing going on. I'm sure this year's lineup and venue and everything that they're bringing to the table, they're going to outdo themselves again. And yeah, I hope to be part of it again.
Well, I hope. Well, hopefully you go to FYA at one, maybe next year's too, because that's closer to us. FYA in Tampa is closer to us. Maybe you get invited or play that one. But yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you guys at some point. Hopefully, obviously, because I'm just constantly listening to the new record. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out, check it out, buy it, stream it. I think most of the vinyls are probably gone by this time. I know a lot of them are already sold. Sold out. First pressing, at least.
A lot of the first press is gone. I think at this time there's a few copies of our Rough Trade exclusive available, but I do know there's a second press on the way already. So
cool.
We should be able to, it should be available again pretty soon.
Awesome. Stick around for 3 seconds. I'm gonna close this down, and then I want to chat with you about something else. Offline. All right. Thanks again, brother, and we will. Best of luck.
Thanks, David.